on this computer, so everybody's live. Welcome Aurora Light and William Alek.
Hello, Alfred.
Hello, Alfred. Thank you for having us back.
Oh, totally. Well, again, we have this extraordinary two-part webinar where we're in this first part. Bill has prepared more on the Golden Age technology and more on the perpendicular universe. That is a total new discovery, and so we're really going to be going this. And then once we go through the PowerPoint, we'll be going to straight to you all in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona, and then we'll go into the second part of the webinar where we can discuss more in a free-floating discussion here, more of the implications. So I'm really going to turn it over to you, Bill and Aurora, to take us through here in this initial part of the webinar on your new transformational new energy technology. Yeah.
All right, we're ready for you. I think
Okay.
we put together something for you here.
Now, Alfred, are we supposed to be seeing an image here?
Well,
it's not showing up on Facebook.
Oh, well, it's if we go to our I'm just bringing it to our page on Facebook, and it's streaming live on Facebook.
Okay.
Well, we're not getting it over here for some reason.
Oh,
But okay.
well, you try refreshing your browser.
Refresh. Can you do that while we're talking?
Yeah, because this is I'm on the page and it's streaming live.
Okay. Okay, good.
All right, great.
Yeah. So,
okay, so
we are now
Bill's
live.
Got a nice presentation ready for you here, Alfred. So we'll
good.
Take it on here. Now, do you pull it up, Bill, or who built it up?
Yeah, I control it from my end.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd give a brief introduction. You know, last week, we just gave some highlights, you know, about our technology that we're introducing. You know, we're into biotech, energy, and space applications. And along with it is a new physics. And that's what we're going to get into today with this webinar, is talking about this new physics. And to be honest with you, Alfred, this should not be a new physics at all. This should have evolved way back in the 1920s. And that's what I want to talk about today, is that the physics was deliberately thrown out. It was a deliberate action on the scientific establishment at that time. You know, you have the great names like Heisenberg, Oppenheimer, Einstein, you know, all the great physicists back then. They had the theory of everything, all right? They've had it back then in the 1920s, late 1920s. They had a unified field theory, but they couldn't deal with it. And the reason why they couldn't deal with this new physics back then is that it unified the physical universe with the metaphysical universe, okay? A unified field theory of those universes. And so they did not want to deal with the metaphysical, so they just simply threw it away. They come up with, they contrive mathematical tricks, all right? And they just simply got rid of this other universe that is at right angles. What are you doing?
Talk to the camera.
That's at right angles to our universe, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about today, is unifying the physical and the metaphysical universes and to provide a unified field theory, okay, that describes everything.
All right.
Okay? And it can be all described in 7 dimensions. You know, how they came up with what, 11 dimensions, 21 dimensions. It's completely absurd what modern physics is today. They can't prove it. They can't prove any of these theoretical models. They just can't do it, all right? But what I'm going to talk about today is a complete unified model of a 7-dimensional universe. And I'll go into detail, what we know about this technology, and this universe, and how our technology taps into this alternative, this parallel universe, because we see some very intriguing results, okay, with our technology. And so that's what we're going to get into today. So Alfred, if you please here, switch over to the PowerPoint presentation with the share screen.
Okay, so do you want me to?
I thought you were doing
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah. Do you want to show the PowerPoint yourself, or do you want me to show it? Sorry.
Okay, well, I have it on my one screen here.
Okay.
Can we share the screen?
Well, you're the
He
person.
has to do it.
Do you want me to share screen, or are you going to share screen? You're actually share screening now.
Okay. Is it being broadcasted or?
Yeah, it's on Facebook Live now.
Okay.
And so
we're not seeing it.
We have the title screen.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So you can see the title screen then.
Yeah. So
Okay,
do you want to
great.
go to? Do you want to go to the second slide, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So now we're at the
slide.
second slide entitled "The Dirac Solution."
Right. Now,
Okay.
Dr. Paul Dirac, he wrote and published his famous equation. And the solution to this Dirac equation is E equals plus or minus MC squared.
Yeah, you can move over.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay, the solution is that E equals plus or minus MC squared. Now, what is the origin of this equation? Well, on this first slide here, this fellow, he's an electrical engineer. His name was Oliver Heaviside, published this E equals MC squared way back in 1890, but it didn't have this negative sign associated with it. And so that's when it first started to appear in publications in the scientific journals. And then Paul Dirac came along in the 1920s, and to be more specific here, 1928, and published his famous equation that you can look up on the internet. Just Google the Dirac equation.
Look at the screen.
And the solution to the Dirac equation is E equals plus or minus MC squared. And so what does that mean? Well, you can have, there's 2 solutions to E equals plus or minus MC squared. You can have positive energy, positive mass associated with that. You can also have negative energy, negative mass. And so the establishment of the day, they just, this negative energy, negative mass solution. And he didn't want to deal with it because here you have a unified theory that describes everything. And what the Dirac equation predicts is, of course, the electron. And it also predicted the positron. And at that day, at that time, back in the late 1920s, the positron was yet to be discovered. It was discovered a few years later. But what's so interesting about this is that it predicted correctly the positron, okay? Now it also predicts other particles, such as this negative energy solution. It predicts a negative energy electron and a negative energy positron. And so the establishment was trying to figure out, well, how to deal with this. And so the solution that they came up with is that they came up with a mathematical trick to get rid of the negative energy solution, so that we live in a strictly positive energy universe, and there's no negative energy at all, okay? But yet, negative energy shows up in various sorts of very interesting experiments, okay? So the boundary conditions for this negative energy component here was that everything stopped at 0 point. So you have a positive energy universe delimited, okay, with 0 point. So everything stopped at 0 point. So this gave a boundary condition to what was being discussed at that time. Negative energy, we're not going to deal with it. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so the Dirac equation, published in 1928, has this E equals plus or minus mc squared. And back in 2002, a very interesting article appeared in this magazine called Infinite Energy Magazine. And this author by the name of Don Hodson really broke down the essence of the Dirac equation. And he wrote about it in this article. And I like to instruct your listeners out there to look up this article. It's on our website. I believe it's under the science webpage on our website. And maybe you can put this up on your website also, Alfred, because it really covers the basics behind the Dirac equation, okay? And what I did is, over the past few years, I really didn't start digging into this paper until just a few years ago. And I discovered that it dovetailed perfectly into my work, because I'm also working with this negative energy component. And this negative energy can be traced back to various sorts of experiments and devices built over the past 30, 40 years. And of course, the one that I spoke about in last week's meeting was Tom Bearden, writing various sorts of papers about this negative energy and really the characteristics of negative energy, what it does and how you work with it, and the various sorts of effects. And the thing is that with any sort of instrumentation, you cannot directly measure negative energy. And I'll get into that a little later here in this discussion. Okay, so back in 2002, Don Hodson wrote this paper, digging into the Dirac equation, what it means, and all these implications behind it. And of course, I came along a little later here, and I put a lot of what Don Hodson wrote about into a picture form that can be easily understood. And I put some of those pictures in this presentation here. So I want to mention to all your listeners here that if they want to know more about this Dirac equation and the sea of negative energy, to get into this paper, because it is fantastic. I consider it the Bible of negative energy, and it's just fantastic. Okay, the way that Hodson presents the material here. So go on to the next page. Okay, the Dirac equation. Now, I mentioned before that the establishment had a lot of trouble with this because, well, let's look at the first one here, Heisenberg, at the time. Back in 1928, when this paper was first published, Heisenberg wrote that this Dirac equation, he called it the saddest chapter of modern physics, is and remains the Dirac theory. So right away, Dirac is under extreme attack by the establishment because they didn't want to deal with this negative energy component.
Talk about negative energy, they negated them.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's right.
He had it coming at him.
Right. And so Heisenberg in 1934 also wrote, now you'll find this in the paper, right there. Hodson did his homework, presented the history, behind this Dirac equation and what the establishment was actually doing at that time, what they thought about this. So in 34, Heisenberg wrote, I regard the Dirac theory as learned trash, which no one can take seriously. Now that is some remark, I'll tell you that. And so they developed this mathematical trick to get rid of the negative energy component from the Dirac theory. So at this point, the proverbial expression here is in 1934, they threw away the baby. Okay, the baby was thrown out with the bathwater at this point. So there's no Jetson age, there are no UFOs, none of this stuff exists, okay? Because it's not in any of our equations. They don't teach it at any universities. They don't touch on anything to do with negative energy. And to take that a step further, because Hodson gets into this, the electromagnetic ether. They threw away the ether. And when you do that, you all of a sudden make things extremely difficult to do in quantum mechanics. And an example of that is, of course, the quantum tunneling phenomena, which occurs in these devices. They made it very, very difficult to do when this fellow by the name of Schrodinger and his wave equation came along. And of course, another popular scientist at that day was de Broglie, okay, with his de Broglie wave packets. And he kind of mutilated or created out of thin air quantum mechanics to hide the fact and this fact is that completely do away with this negative energy and ether, and we're going to take that and we're going to hide that. And so that's why they created quantum mechanics, and everything became a wave function at that point and a probability function as well, in order to figure out these quantum mechanical processes that are going on. Now, I discovered later that guess what? You can solve quantum mechanics using classical equations. And I did that for quantum tunneling, and I got the same exact equation that you get, whether it's classical solution or the quantum mechanical solution that hides the classical solution. I get the same result, the same identical equation for quantum tunneling effects. I solved it classically. I also heard of another researcher that also solved this classically as well. So you got these independent researchers out there solving these tough problems, and all of a sudden becomes very easy to do, okay? So let's go on to the next slide here. All right, this slide. This is the Dirac universe. actually two universes. We have our real universe, what we call real 3D space, and that's positive energy. Time is forward in our universe. Time only runs in one direction, it's time forward. And so what that means is that any source of energy we come across was produced in the past. Everything is stored in the past in our universe. Well, wait a minute, what about the future? Where's that at? Well, it turns out that the future is stored in this imaginary space. Look left of that diagram, imaginary space, where time is reversed. That's the negative energy component of our parallel universe. And we'll get into a little later on how that operates. But now we run across Einstein's, what's called Einstein space-time, general relativity. And what's he talking about here? Curvature, 4 dimensions. Actually, general relativity only describes 3 1/2 dimensions. The 1/2 is the time forward component of our real 3D universe. So in our universe, you can only have negative space-time curvature in general relativity. But now what about this other type of curvature, a positive curvature? Well, that can only occur in this imaginary 3D space that's parallel to ours. So in other words, to access this other universe that's at essentially right angles to ours, it's a complex, what's called a complex number or imaginary numbers. And this is where God comes along and takes the square root of a -1. That's how we define imaginary numbers. And so in a lot of our math that we do here is that we work with complex numbers. And it turns out that when you take the square of a complex number, which shows up in a lot of our math, when you take the square of that complex number, you come out with -1. And then when you apply it, calculating energy in a lot of our electrical systems, for example, you find out that that square of a -1 gives you negative energy, okay? All our equations still work for the physical universe that we're in here. We're kind of locked into this real 3D universe, but to access this parallel universe, we have to work with what are called complex numbers. Okay, so in this diagram, we see that to the right of time, we have the time forward, real 3D space, that's our universe. General relativity, which describes 3 1/2 dimensions of space-time. But to get to this negative energy component here, we have to work with complex numbers, and we have imaginary 3D space that's now a complex space. Now, I call that Dirac subspace or hyperspace model is the title on this. It's like, wait a minute, subspace. Where have I heard subspace before, Aurora?
You've probably been watching Star Trek for 3 decades.
There you go. You hear about subspace in Star Trek, right?
This is Bill's cartoon.
Yeah. I love Star Trek. I grew up on Star Trek. Where did Roddenberry get these fantastic ideas from?
From my friend.
There you go. Aurora has the real story behind the origin of Star Trek, and where Roddenberry got all these incredible ideas, like warp field.
I'll tell you at the end of today.
Teleportation.
I'll talk about it at the end of your of the day.
Alfred, it'd be so fascinating to hear the real story behind Star Trek, and Aurora has that information. So I think that'll make an incredible discussion here. But we're dealing with something here that's called subspace.
Right.
Okay. Sometimes I call it hyperspace. But if we go back to Star Trek jargon here, we're looking at subspace. That's this complex space or this imaginary space. And if you look it up on Google, if you look up subspace on Google, you see that it tracks back to Star Trek. All right. And that they use this as a communications for instantaneous communications. Very interesting, huh? And so this is this negative energy universe where everything is stored from the future. Here in our universe, everything is stored in the past. But in this imaginary realm, okay, this imaginary 3D space, this subspace, everything is stored from the future in that universe. And I'll get into that detail a little later here. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, characteristics of Dirac's real 3D space. Well, we all know what that is, right? I mean, that's what's been studied ever since they threw away negative energy back in the 1920s here. We've been really pounding away at this real 3D space, haven't we? So we know we have positive energy, positive mass. Time runs forward in this universe. We have positive temperature. And of course, gravity. Okay, we have what's called negative space-time curvature, or Einstein's general relativity, where you have negative space-time curvature, and that's our gravity. And most of all, gravity is attractive in this universe, okay? But that's all that we have. Next slide. All right, characteristics of this Dirac complex 3D space, this imaginary space. For one thing, it's at right angles to our 3D space. It's at right angles. It's like, wait a minute, how can something be at right angles where you're describing, 3D space here? How can something be at right angles to this? Well, that occurs when you start working with complex numbers. Is that a whole other universe parallel to ours, so to speak, at right angles to these 3 dimensions.
Can I interject? In metaphysics, they call it the right angle turn.
There you go. There you go. See that?
To go into the next dimension.
Metaphysics, you see, I mentioned that before.
They call it the right angle turn. They've always talked about it. And that'll take you into the next dimension.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so it's at right angles to our 3D space. It has negative energy associated with it, negative mass. It's time reversed, okay, time reversed. We have negative temperatures. And it's like, wait a minute, where have I heard negative temperatures before? Well, you see it in some of the latest research papers where they talk about negative temperatures, but only by a tiny amount. Right there at 0 point, absolute 0, where there's nothing below absolute 0. Well, they're just starting to look at negative temperatures, okay? So that's the level that mainstream is at. You have something called a positive space-time curvature, where gravity is repulsive. You have repulsive gravity. Here in our universe, gravity is attractive. Okay, if you have a black hole, well, that's attractive. Curvatures. But here, gravity is repulsive. Okay, so where gravity here would be considered what, a pull? There, it's considered a push. Okay. Next slide. Measuring the Dirac imaginary space. Well, that's a very good question because we have no instrumentation that can measure negative energy, that can measure anything from this parallel universe because all our instrumentation works with positive energy. Now we can measure the effect that negative energy has, on some of our devices. And if you want, Alfred, we can do a show next week where I get into these technologies of warp drive. We can talk about the Alcubierre warp drive. We can talk about anti-gravity. We can take this a step further if you want to do the show next
whenever it's convenient.
or whenever.
Yeah.
That's right. So I can go into a lot more detail about these technologies in terms of practical applications of what I'm talking about today. Okay, so none of our instrumentation will measure anything with this parallel universe. You won't even know it's there unless you're specifically looking for it. There are certain things to look for with how negative energy impacts certain devices or certain technologies.
I want to describe it as another station on the radio. Unless you're tuned into it, you don't even know it's there.
Well, that's a good analogy.
Thank you.
That's great. Okay, so.
I've been lecturing on it for 30 years. I finally met a man who knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
Okay, so we have no instrumentation that can directly measure negative energy, but we can see the effect it has on some of these devices. And the one that I talked about last week was the Floyd Sweet device, and how Tom Bearden wrote about it, took videos of it, gave presentations at all sorts of conferences talking about this Floyd Sweet device and saying, yeah, this thing's for real. His transformer didn't run hot. Here he is driving a kilowatt load, and the device is ice cold, okay? Negative temperature.
How can that
Does that
be?
work? How can that be? And of course, modern physics has no clue what's going on. Therefore, the device doesn't exist, right?
No, couldn't exist.
It's a fraud, it's a fake. It's not doing what it's doing. Do not ever show this device to me again.
Don't, and all of you out there, don't look over here.
Right.
Don't look over there. There's nothing to see.
Right. Yeah. So they give you all these wonderful distractions, right? But here this device is doing this amazing thing, It's running with a milliwatt of power coming in and a full load kilowatt going out. The machine's operating ice cold. It's like, what's going on here? With the physics that I'm presenting here, you can now explain virtually every aspect of this device. Floyd also said this device lost 90% of its weight. This, of course, was reported by Tom Beard. It's like, wait a minute here. Am I hearing anti-gravity?
Yes,
here?
you are.
Okay, so our instrumentation can only measure positive energy, but we see the effect of this negative energy when you start measuring different points on the transformer. Okay, we see that we have, wait a minute, a milliwatt coming in, right? We're measuring that real electric current to be a milliwatt. And yet the output is reading a kilowatt, okay? We can measure that. We can also measure the temperature of that transformer and say, wait a minute, it's not running hot. And yet here it is driving a kilowatt load. The thing should be, it should be cooking, It should be,
Can make some toast.
a few hundred, yeah.
Make
You should be able
breakfast on
to
it.
put an egg on it and fry the egg, right?
Exactly.
But here it's going to freeze the egg. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. But yet, if you put it in the context of what I'm presenting here, you all of a sudden have a complete explanation of what's going on with this technology, okay? So let's go on to the next slide. All right, well, this is what we know about what's generally referred to as the quantum vacuum. We know that in physics, there's all these perturbations occurring in space, these what they call virtual particle flux, okay? Where these particles, they come into existence, then they go out of existence. The out of existence part is pretty much ignored. Where did it go? It has to go somewhere. Well, it just goes out of existence, forget about it, right? Well, it turns out that out of existence part is the negative energy side of our universe. So now this virtual particle is showing up in this negative energy universe. It's gone from our universe, our positive energy universe. And so it bounces between the two universes at 0 point. And I'm describing the particle on the right. Okay, on this page here, net zero momentum macro particle formation. You have at 0 point what's called the ether. The ether is made up of these virtual particles that we call electron-positron pairs. And we know from these atom smashers, right, from CERN, that you have this virtual particle flux can manifest in our universe as electron-positron pairs. If you provide enough energy to these pairs, they'll break up and they'll start to spin in opposite directions and just spin away. So you have electrons and positrons, and we know that they form these pairs. But now mainstream doesn't really acknowledge it. Okay, even though we know this exists, they don't fully acknowledge it because they don't want to admit that there's an ether, but yet it shows up, okay, in all these particle experiments. And so they found these various sorts of mathematical tricks to be able to deal with that. You know, that you have these creation events where these electrons and positrons come out of nothing, which is an absurdity. You have to come from somewhere. That's this virtual particle flux. You also have something called an annihilation event. And of course, Hodson deals with this in his paper. There's no such thing as creation events. There is no such thing as annihilation events. Where the two particles come together, they give off a gamma ray, and then they vanish. Okay, and where they vanish to, well, we don't really know. They just completely disappear.
Maybe they take a right angle.
That is your virtual particle flux. That is your ether that's all around us. Now, the nature of these electron-positron pairs, and of course, Hodson addresses this in his paper, the nature of these virtual particle flux is that, first of all, they have no mass. There's a mass cancellation in their structure where you have no mass, and they're non-stationary, okay? Now, physicists will always go back to the Michelson-Morley experiment, which was conducted around this Dirac theory, the Michelson-Morley experiment. You can look it up on Google, which explains that, well, we completely done away with the ether. The ether doesn't exist, therefore. And so when they did away with the ether, they really shot themselves in the head, okay? Because the ether in this situation, what I'm describing here, is that the ether is non-stationary. Their model of the ether back in the 1910, 1920s was a stationary ether, and the Michelson-Morley experiment was supposed to measure that ether drift. They didn't see it, therefore the ether doesn't exist.
And it's as simple as that.
And it's as simple as that. That's right. A huge mistake on their part. So we're looking at two things that occurred back in the 1920s, explained away back in the 1930s, is that they completely done away with negative energy and they've done away with the ether. And so they made things extremely complicated and requiring this crazy mathematics. They've been developing probabilities, wave functions, and it turns out you can solve all this when you put the negative energy and ether back into the equation. All of a sudden you can solve these problems classically, okay? Classically. And I did that. I wrote a paper. I really wrote a book on it a number of years ago called Newtonian Torsion Physics. It was published in academia.edu. I have over 1,800 other researchers referencing that book that I wrote, Book of Equations of Newtonian Torsion Physics, where I provide the classic solution to these hard problems, and especially in quantum tunneling, because I derive the same identical equation with quantum tunneling as they do with their crazy Schrodinger and de Broglie's equations. When you do all that crazy mathematics, you end up with the same equation. Now it comes down to one thing though, okay, is how they interpret the universe. That's what it comes down to. And if I can do it classically, I have a different interpretation, and mine is much more realistic than what the establishment is doing because of this classical solution. So, okay, we see this on this slide, what the active vacuum is. Okay, we have this ether. It's an electromagnetic Lorentz ether. You could read about that in Hodgson's paper, some of the history behind that. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, random vacuum fluctuations. Physics knows about this, how these particles come in and out of existence. And they're really just manifesting in our real 3D universe for a very short time. There's an energy exchange that occurs within the macro particle, and then it goes out of our universe into this parallel, this imaginary universe, subspace, so to speak here. They manifest there, and then they come back. Okay, so they're popping in and out of existence here.
In and out of dimensions.
Right, that's correct. So we call that random fluctuations. Okay, now, those random fluctuations on this slide, it's called vacuum polarization between unlike charges. And so you take an electron and either a proton or a positron, and that organizes the ether into what are called lines of flux. And you see that in this diagram between the electron and the positron. You see these lines of flux that form. And you see that whether you have a magnet, you see that electrically with electric potentials, especially with high voltages, it forms these lines of flux. And you can take that all the way down to this level here, where you have these actual lines of flux, where it organizes the virtual particle flux, or these electron-positron pairs. That's our ether forming, okay, this pattern between electrons, negative particles, and positive particles. So you have this electric flux that forms. So now there's something else going on here too, because science also knows that the ether is considered a boson spin 0 macro particle. But when they get organized, like you see in this diagram here between electrons and positrons, okay, these lines of flux, is that now there's an energy exchange going on between the electrons and positron. There's an exchange of what's called angular momentum. And angular momentum is
the right angle turn.
Is a property, well, not yet, Aurora. It's a property of electrons and positrons.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have, and the way that Hodgson describes it is that a macroparticle, you know, when they form these long chains of flux, is that they transfer the angular momentum from the electron to the positron. So you had this flow of energy, and that actually describes what's called a photon, okay? The photon is nothing more than angular momentum flowing at a specific speed, i.e. the speed of light, between these electrons and positrons. That's your photon flux that's flowing there as angular momentum. Now, what's interesting about this angular momentum is that when you look at the equation, the energy of that angular momentum can be positive, but that energy can also be negative if you make the angular velocity in that equation complex. Okay, like I said before, when you take the square of a square root of a -1 equals a -1, when you compute that energy, it's like, wait a minute, that's negative energy if that angular momentum becomes complex. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so this describes the electric and magnetic flux, okay, how we're organizing the vacuum that occurs in between electrons and positrons, and also in magnets. Magnets also organize the flux as well. And so you see these very long lines of flux lines. And as I mentioned before, the left side of this diagram shows what manifests in our real 3D space. When we take del dot B, okay, which describes the field going through a volume of space, is always equal to 0. So that the same field that enters is the same field that leaves. The same is true for complex space. Okay, when you start dealing with imaginary space as well, that also equals 0. So what that means is that when I was describing a complex or an imaginary angular velocity associated with angular momentum, is that that angular velocity can become imaginary, that manifest in this imaginary space.
Look at your camera.
Okay, it manifests in imaginary space. In this other universe is where this angular momentum, this energy, is going to manifest. Okay, and we see that affecting anything that's in our positive energy space. You'll start to see a drop in the real energy in our real 3D universe, and yet an increase, okay, because energy is conserved here. The energy is now going to manifest in this complex space. So all the energy is still there, but the negative energy component is now manifesting in this parallel universe. But it still carries with it the energy to move electrons, and we'll get into that later, because that completely explains the Floyd-Sweet device. Is that how can you have a milliwatt of power coming in and get a kilowatt out? Well, that energy is manifesting now in the complex space, or this imaginary space, and it can still move those electrons in the circuit to give you a kilowatt coming out of power, okay? Even though that milliwatt, that tiny bit of real power is there, the negative energy component now is manifesting in this imaginary space. And you still have all the energy there to move those electrons in our real 3D space. Okay, next slide. So, the new scientific discovery here, what is it? And we're going to get into that with some of the videos, okay, that we're going to show here of actual experiments that we've done here, you know, at Aurora Tech, showing you this new scientific discovery. And what is it? Well, it turns out that Newton's gravitational constant is not a constant. It's like, wait a minute. A constant is not a constant, right? It turns out that Newton's big G in his calculations, what I'm showing here, and you'll see it in Newton's gravitational equation, and you also see it in Einstein's general relativity, is that the big G is not a constant, but can be engineered using magnetics. And that's what the videos are going to show, okay? And so when you talk about warp drive, for example, warp drive engine technology, every physicist knows, because the calculations have already been done, that we just can't do it. You know, we can't build warp drive engines. It takes the power of a star to do it. It takes the power of the planet Jupiter to be able to bend space-time enough, okay, to create these inertialess drive systems. Therefore, we do not know how, for example, the M drive works. You know, any of these inertialess propulsion systems should not work at all, but yet have been demonstrated that, yes, they do work. And it turns out that there's a manipulation of big G, and we'll get into that maybe next week or the next time that Alfred will have us on. We'll address these warp drives, we'll address anti-gravity, we'll also look at the effects of these over unity free energy transformers. We'll get into that because the effect is amazing that negative energy has on positive energy systems. Okay, so the discovery here is that we can manipulate, we can change big G such that these equations here that I show, especially with general relativity, because in order to bend space, you'll see here that it's required that you must have a force of at least 10 to the 42nd power in newtons. That's an absurd amount of force to be able to bend space-time. It is that inflexible. 10 to the 42nd power in newtons to be able to bend space-time. And that's why these physicists say, well, we just can't do it, yet they have Jupiter. You know, a warp drive engine the size of Jupiter to be able to curve space-time. But yet, these devices can do it very easily at our scale. You don't need Jupiter, you don't need a star to be able to bend space-time, because it's done quite easily with magnetics. And that's what we're going to show here, okay? So let's go on to the next slide, videos. I have two videos that I'd like to play here. One here talks about an experiment we did there at the Sedona Creative Life Center, where we replicated this experiment done by Boyd Bushman. And I mentioned that last week in our webinar last week about Boyd Bushman doing this experiment. And what's so amazing about the Boyd Bushman experiment is that he links electromagnetism to gravity. He makes the connection, okay? And I just told you that we can manipulate big G, the gravitational constant, using magnetism. Well, that's this Boyd Bushman experiment clearly shows that we can do that, okay? So we'll play that video. The second video is the effect that you see with these magnets, how the real field will vanish when you force these magnets together. There's a forcing function here that when you force these magnets together, the field, the magnetic field that's outside of that, those magnets will literally vanish. And we'll play that
That's
second
our
video.
field dampening effect, right?
Yes, we call that a magnetic field dampening, a dampening field effect, a magnetic dampening field effect.
There you go.
And where do you hear that, Aurora? Where do you hear a magnetic dampening field? Where do I hear that?
Bows of a cloud?
Wrong. Star Trek. There are episodes of Star Trek where they mention a dampening field. You also hear about dampening fields and the UFO phenomena.
Well, don't ask me any questions you know the answer to unless you want a ridiculous reply.
Thanks, Aurora.
You're welcome. Anytime.
So Aurora here is our UFO experiment.
There you go.
Our expert. She's our expert UFO expert.
I'm an experiment too. That's pretty funny.
Right.
Freudian slip over there.
Yeah, so the UFO phenomena. I mean, you hear about, how these craft that they'll fly over one of our cars or trucks, an old Ford 150, right? UFO will fly over it. All of a sudden, the power will just drop out on this Ford. It's like, gosh, I lost all the power. And then when the ship passes over, clears the truck, the power just comes back on again. That is the field dampening effect.
A lot of wives have that effect on their husbands.
Yes, I noticed that too. It becomes programmed into your brain.
All right, so are you done with are you going to play these now?
Yeah, I thought that we'd play these two videos.
All right,
here.
let's go for it.
Is that something you can manage at your end, Alfred, or?
Yes. I hadn't set them up. It'll just take a moment for me to set that up.
Okay.
Because I hadn't planned on doing that. So let me.
Because I do have the.
Do you?
I thought I had the link at my end.
Let me just see where we have those. We have those links here, and I just want to bring them over here. And which would you like to do, the magnetic dampening field effect video
well, I thought
first?
maybe another one, but
The first one at the top.
Replicating the
Wait,
Bushman
right.
experiment. Okay, good. Let me now. What we'll have to do is you will first have to go out of your screen share. So if you could go in there and go out of your screen share.
Okay.
So I think you're out of your screen share now, correct?
Right.
Okay, so let me see. I'm just trying to find. Yeah, let me just share the screen. And then we're now coming up. Now, the only issue that I'm concerned about here is sound. So I'm going to.
Nothing like spring
This sound. And let's see. What the sound is here. Can you hear sound?
Yes.
It's rocking, baby. Got it going on. talk over it?
Can we talk over this, Alfred?
Yes.
A lot of people are doing nothing more than getting huge quantities of mass and see if they can get a gravity wave to cause things to move. Well, that isn't what we're talking about at all. So I wondered if gravity could be related to its cousin magnetism. And so I found that when I take two magnets together, I have some neodymiums around here that I'm actually afraid of. They can danger you. But anyhow, when you take a magnet, you go to put them together and they go clunk, right? But you take one of them, move it around, and all of a sudden it doesn't want to go right. Repulsive. So I got I ordered one at $5,000 a piece. Wow. with a 1/4-inch hole through between both of them, and I put a brass bolt and I tightened them down, forcing them together. And then I put them together in a thing that looks kind of like a rock. Okay, and then I got another one that didn't have magnets in it. And Galileo, in all his endeavors, he went up to the Leaning Tower of Pisa and he dropped a big rock and a small rock. And his buddy down the bottom kept telling him that the large rock and the small rock arrived at the same time.
Well, in my left hand, I have a feather. In my right hand, a hammer. I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of the gentleman named Galileo a long time ago, who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects and gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. And the feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the two up here and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
Well, I went up in the Lockheed Building 501 by the side of escalators and elevators.
Oh, wow.
And I got 9 guys that were not educated and didn't have pre-opinions on anything. And I dropped my 2 rocks. And I said, what I would like you to do is, I told them what I'd like you to do is I would like you to take whichever one arrives first, get it in your hand, and when I come down the elevator, hand it to me. Now, they looked identical, except for...
So and nobody knew it was inside?
No, absolutely not. All the 9 times that I tested it, it's as though the one with the opposing magnet field extending out 3 feet on each side. I actually measured how big the field was. And on each side of one rock, I had a total of 6 feet. At any rate, the other rock arrived first.
Which one arrived first?
The one that had no magnetic field in it.
So you were able to cancel out gravity to a certain degree. You were able to cancel, reduce the mass gravity effect.
Precisely.
By opposing fields.
Isn't that nice? You bet. And got 9 signatures and width. I always skip,
You did that at Lockheed. Well, what survey is this?
At least 8 years ago.
This is the actual document of Boyd's where he proved that by altering the field in a falling body, the magnetic field, it reduced its mass gravity equivalent and canceled out the effects of gravity to a certain percentage. And he did a building 500 drop test conducted from a height of 59 feet. The location is in White Solomon, Texas. The time was 12:20 p.m. And this was in 1995, December 12th. Nobody knows this.
I know it.
So gravity, mass gravity is not, you can alter it.
Well, gravity within itself has to have, gravity goes through anything that's solid and anything like iron or anything else. But it has to have a magnetic component, which may be canceling out within itself. But as soon as it got around my rock, it all of a sudden recognize a presence.
But somebody,
Am I right?
one of Einstein's students tried to merge electromagnetism and gravity, and he rejected it. But he didn't have an experiment like you.
No, I understand. I know that.
Yeah.
But see, nature never uses English. It doesn't speak. It doesn't speak any language. But yet it's talking to us all the time.
Right.
And the key thing is to identify what it
Wow,
Yeah, this is where I replicated Boyd Bushman's experiment.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I don't know. Maybe not.
Ask Alfred if he can hear you.
That's where I epoxy them together.
Oh, I'm glad you're showing everybody just how to do it. Are you mental? Why don't you get over yourself? That's bad. I'm glad I invested all my money in you.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Show everybody everything. Oh, that's how to make the rock. She made that bag at the bottom. Looks ridiculous. Oh, it's that for just laying down?
It's a pillow.
Oh, I see. Looks like a trash bag.
Anti-gravity.
Where are they?
There.
Mm. Okay, how many times are you gonna show us?
Just one more. Boom.
come it's not much different that time?
What's the time?
We should have not even included this last one. It's a bummer. So there, leave it out. Okay. Last one was a bummer. Wasn't the same.
Well, it turned out that there was a slight
All right, whatever.
increase.
Yeah, pitiful. Anyway, left it out. You always have to be absurd. Okay, next.
Okay.
Good luck. Good luck now. That last one was a bummer.
Alfred?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, so let me see. Okay, so now we can go to the next, which is the magnetic
Yeah,
damp.
I just wanted to mention that in that last video was that I extended the Boyd-Bushman experiment to use magnets in the attractive configuration. See, Boyd just did the experiment using opposing magnetic fields, and then I used the opposing first and then the attractive second, and I observed an opposite effect, okay, with that drop test. So there's a connection between magnetism and gravity, and that's what I wanted to show there.
Very good. Okay, so this is a video, magnetic dampening field. Should we start
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, this shows the effect of what happens when you put two magnets together
Okay.
and how that affects electrons.
How much longer is your presentation?
Now this video here has no audio at all.
Why don't you talk over it and record it that way?
Can I talk over this, Alfred?
Sure, go ahead.
Let's hit it.
Yeah, this shows I have a Dell 15N CRT computer monitor, which fires electrons at the screen. So what we're doing is that we're placing a magnet, a ferrite magnet, in front of the screen. And that shows you how it deflects electrons, you know, hitting the screen. So it gives you this rainbow-like effect. Must be the president. Is it Trump? Is Trump watching?
He's warning us that they're after us.
Yeah.
It's your wake-up call.
And what I'm showing here is that there's a residual effect from that magnet placed next to the screen. And so we put the magnet back, and the field is affecting the electrons, giving you this rainbow-like effect. Because normally it's just a flat red screen.
Wow, that's incredible.
So now we take the second magnet.
It's like the spaceships. They don't need light bulbs, I guess.
And so in the attractive configuration,
Wow,
we see an increase in the magnetic field.
how beautiful. Nature is stunning.
And we pull it away, and then we see a slight increase in the residual magnetic field on the screen,
Oh yeah,
okay?
it's the first I've seen this. It's quite lovely.
And then we placed a magnet back. There we go. Remove the second magnet. And then we see the deflection from the first magnet, affecting the electrons. And then when we pull that magnet away, we still see the residual effect. See, there's a screen there on a CRT that is, it is magnetic. So then we put the magnet back. And now we show the magnetic dampening field effect. And this is where we have the magnet set up in its repulsive or opposing magnet configuration. And when we place that next to it, you observe how the real field is forced to vanish, okay? Pull the magnet away, there's the field deflecting the electrons. We then take the second magnet, approach the first magnet there, and you see how the real field vanishes.
That's something. What made you decide to photograph it like that, and how did you photograph it? Just
It's just a video
regular
camera.
video camera.
Yeah. And so we use this effect in all our products.
Okay.
So we call
can
that the
see it
magnetic dampening field effect. It's also known as a torsion field.
Okay, so is this visible to the naked eye then?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Okay, so those are the two videos that I'm showing this week here with the Aurora Tech.
Should I join you?
Yeah. Okay, Alfred, that's the.
Okay, good. I'm getting us out of our, and I'm stopping the share here. Bring us
You
back.
sound like you need some chicken soup over there.
Hi there.
Did you go out of town for the holiday?
So here we are now. We have seen all of this. Oh, and
And what do you
I'm hearing a lot of here. Let me. There we go. I was just
Okay.
getting some of the. Now.
Well, that's quite an education. I think our viewers should, watch this a couple of times to really grasp it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this was extremely advanced, condensed, dense
Physics.
information. So
Right.
Now that we've gone through this, let's back up a bit. And if you could, as they say, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to show you, then I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to tell you what you just saw. So
Okay.
walk us through and tell us what the import of all of this is.
All right, I'm going to sum it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in and sum it up a little bit.
Yeah. There was
Okay,
this
technology. Go ahead.
Go ahead. For example, there was a little sign at the end that said, simply the most advanced technology in the world, time reversed technology, simply
Right.
the most advanced in the world. Now, and to those of us who are observing this, we go, wow, time reversed technology. You're going to have to walk us through all of this.
All right, I'm going to try and give you a visual that might help. Picture science as a pendulum, an energy pendulum swinging back and forth. And then back in the about 100 years ago, after Tesla debuted his technology at the World's Fair in Chicago in 1918, they decided then that this has got to be stopped. You know, they can't let that just roll out, because they wouldn't be able to control it and tax it and meter it. They'd meter your breath if they could. If they could meter your breath, they would, so they could tax you on it, the air you breathe. But they haven't figured out how to do that yet, but they're getting close. They've got you buying bottles of water now for $5 a bottle or whatever. So, you know, we're almost there. So anyway, so what we have to do is we have to let that pendulum swing into the negative that Bill keeps talking about, instead of stopping it at 0 point where they did. They stopped it at 0 point and they said, there's nothing more to see. That's it. It's the end of it, 0 point. But guess what? Beyond 0 point is this whole negative realm that Bill's talking about. This free energy that's there. This that runs cold. And because not only is it free energy that doesn't run hot, and so we could use it really fast and speed it up really fast without problems that you would have if it ran hot, but it's biocompatible and bioenhancing. So because it's bioenhancing, we have the spin-off, the biotechnology, which is nano water, vitality pads, pads for animals, mattress pads, pads for your back, packs to rejuvenate you. Well, why would it rejuvenate you? Here's one right here that Bill's holding up. So why would it rejuvenate you? Why would this pad do that? What is in it? Okay, so you open it up. Here, you can go ahead and take it out and let them see the inner pad. You open it up and you see our technology is inside. Oh, never mind, I'll do it.
We have an array of these.
Yeah, but I just want to show them how it comes. Okay, because I was asking you to open it. Okay, so you open it up and this is what's inside. Okay, and it's encased on each side, so it's nice and comfy. Now, there's 4 of those in there. And what these do is they create this field dampening effect, which in water molecules, for example, allows them to separate. Okay, so usually they're clumped together, 18 to 24 molecules clumped together. So that's why you drink and drink and drink water and you don't feel like really hydrated. And plus there's no electromagnets in it most of the time, because soon after they bottle it, they lose them and stuff. It leaves. So our technology creates this separation effect. It allows it to separate because of the field dampening effect. Gets rid of impedances. Impedances is the problem. It slows down everything. Okay, so impedances are like gravity and the other things. So when we discovered, when we put this technology under a crock of water, that the plants were looking really good from it. Feeling good, looking good, growing faster, stronger. We put that one disc in the bottom of pots for plants. Either you can use it in hydroponics or soil. And the plants grew a lot faster, greater yield, became much more happy and exuberant, and looked like they were like really twice as big as the other plants without it, with a way better yield. And so we're going, wow, look at the results on the plants. So we were drinking it ourselves, and I've been drinking it for about 1.5 years now. And my whole body looks entirely different. All this bloat that I had is gone, completely gone. And swelling I couldn't get rid of since my 30s in my legs has left. And that's just your lymphatic system never really being able to be cleansed properly and stuff because of the hydration is so bad. When they do autopsies on elderly people, what do they find most of the time? They find their kidneys are shriveled up, their livers are shriveled up, misshapen, everything's wackadoodle. Okay, because it's not hydrated right. You're not, when you're flushing, you're drinking that quart of water every day or whatever. You're couple of quarts a day, right? You're supposed to drink. How many people do it? I don't know. But that liver, those kidneys, they're not getting hydrated correctly. So because of that, you start aging and deteriorating. Okay, and aging is nothing but cellular structures not being cloned as well as they were the last time. Okay, so if you clone your cellular structures better than you did last time, that's called rejuvenation. Okay, so how do we rejuvenate our cellular structures? Electromagnetic fields can be an impedance, okay, to cellular rejuvenation. I lectured for the National Health Federation for many years on rejuvenation, cellular rejuvenation. So you get a live blood cell analysis, okay? And you can see what your blood cells look like, especially if it's in living color, it tells a lot. Mine looked fantastic, but mine looked very different than everybody else's. And I think a lot of it has to do with the protocols I put in place throughout my life. So I would suggest that people start with the basics for their health, okay? Getting rid of electromagnetic field impedances. Okay, that's one thing we can do with our technology with a mattress pad. Now, another thing you can do is drink the nano water. Okay, add a little baking soda and lemon to it, and it's going to alkaline your whole body. You know, just a quarter to a half a teaspoon of baking soda, depending on your size, and then a half a lemon every morning to start off with. You're going to start alkalining the body. Okay, once you're alkalining the body, you're going to start feeling way better, not so acidic, you know. So most people are way too acidic. So that's one of the things you can do for cheap and effectiveness. Then also with this nanotechnology, what we found is it gets rid of pain. And people, well, tell them about this client of ours who on the East Coast who had the lymphatic cancer. That's an interesting story.
Right. Well, you know, she took some of our technology here. Now this is, so here we have two magnets, two neodymium magnets that were forced together, and the real field vanishes. And you saw that with the dampening field effect, is that when you place this next to a CRT screen, is that the real field vanishes. Okay, well, where did it go? Well, the real field now curled into this Dirac C.
Mm-hmm.
And we call that a torsion field because it's being forced into this Dirac C. And so when you run the calculations on it, it's like, wait a minute here, you're dealing with negative energy.
Right.
So you can call these two magnets here, it's a net negative energy system. And it's very similar to the Casimir effect. If you look up the Casimir effect, where you have two metal plates, and they say that between the plates, the energy is less than the energy outside the plates,
Mm-hmm.
okay? That is a net negative energy system. So what we have here is a much more powerful Casimir effect because we're doing it with magnets, okay? We have lines of flux that have just vanished, okay? They curled into this Dirac C. So what we have here is a net negative energy system, and that interacts with gravity that I showed in the first video in an anti-gravity manner, okay? That if you were to drop this in a stone, that this would fall slower than the stone, where there's a gravitational interaction with this negative energy system, causing it to fall slower. That's an anti-gravitational effect. So we're seeing a connection between magnetism and gravity, okay, with this type of arrangement.
Now we've seen in biotech that it increases your ability to absorb nutrients from either your supplements or your food. So that makes it really viable, you
Yeah,
know?
you see the torsion field that's produced by this, okay, is interacting with the environment around this. And that's why you saw the screen go red again to its original format. When you put these together, the screen would come back to its normal state again. That's because the real field around this vanished, which then forces the electrons coming off that CRT screen to go back to its original red screen again. So that's called a torsion field effect, or a magnetic dampening field effect, either way, is that we're forcing the field around this, the magnetic field, okay, to curl into this Dirac sea. And that interacts with the environment around this magnet. And if you have water, for example, around this field, and that's what we have in with our plants, is that we put this in the base of a pot, and in the field is interacting with the water in the pot, and that gets absorbed by the roots. And that water is in a form that is less complex than it would normally be. Okay, this torsion field is interacting with water, breaking the water clusters up into what we call nanowater. It's a simpler form, and it's easily absorbed by the plants, by the plant, and it can absorb the nutrients much faster, and the plant grows like up to 50% faster.
Okay,
And that's
and
what we observe with this effect.
also,
So it's this torsion field.
also people, you know, if they absorb their nutrients better drinking the water. You drink the water with your food and your supplements, you're going to be absorbing it much better, getting more mileage out of your nutrients. So I've noticed that I'm a lot less hungry since I've been doing this water, because I'm absorbing my nutrients better. So that's a side benefit too, is that I seem to be getting a lot more out of my food.
Now, when I ran the math on this, and the listener out there can go to our Vimeo webpage here. It's on under, I believe it's the science section on our website, is that you can see a video of my lecture last year with the Extraordinary Technology Conference, where I talk about the physics, okay, of this technology. And when I did the math for a transformer, okay, when you apply negative energy, okay, to this, when you apply these negative energy systems to an ordinary off-the-shelf transformer, you find out that the transformer becomes much more efficient in its operation. And that efficiency can exceed 100% dependent upon the strength of this torsion field that's being produced. So if you increase the strength of this torsion field, this negative energy effect, to a positive energy transformer, it makes it much more efficient in its operation. And theoretically, if the energy, positive energy, equals the negative energy you're putting in, that efficiency is right at 0 point, and it's infinite. You have infinite efficiency of this transformer. And that's true for any biological system as well. Biological systems act just like this transformer, transforming one form of energy into another. And when it does so, when you add negative energy to this, it becomes much more efficient in its operation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, you know, it can affect, you know, you can allow the body to heal itself in a much more efficient manner.
Yes.
And that's what this technology does. Okay, it improves the efficiency of the body to be able to heal itself. And that's perfect for cancer. Okay, people that have cancer, they'll be able to fight the cancer with this technology.
For example, this one gal we're talking about with the lymph node problems in her legs, you know, lymphoma in her legs and stuff. She just found that she was bedridden. She couldn't even go anywhere. and she was so messed up. And she put that technology on her legs and started drinking the nano water. And next thing you know, it was like she's out of bed. She says she only has to use it 45 minutes in the morning, 45 minutes at night, and the swelling is it's like 95% gone. She's back in the game, back in the saddle, driving, going places, living her life. So, yeah, it's a testimonial, and people who use it on their backs, like we had chronic back pain, and they put the pad behind their chairs. They say 30 years worth of chronic back pain. Got a testimony right on our website by our physicist from Stanford University who said 30 years of back pain has been alleviated completely.
Right, right. So really what you're saying is that you're demonstrating to us a basic scientific breakthrough, and
Right.
on top of that, you have made specific products that people can access based on this scientific breakthrough.
Yeah, they can either get them for free they can get them for free, Alfred, by investing in our company. We're selling $1 a share friends and family stock to, right now we're just finishing out the $1 a share rollout of our $1 million rollout. And then we're raising larger amounts from angel investors here very soon. So we're finishing it all up here. So if they want to get involved with us and they want to find out how they can get this technology for themselves for free and become an investor with us, or if they want to just get the technology, it's up to them. But I highly suggest that people take advantage of this $1 a share time. It's going to be a little tiny window of opportunity.
Right.
That's left. So
and so they would contact you, I suppose.
Yeah, they'll contact us. Yeah, I'll give out a phone number, a direct phone number here. It's all on a website. I think Bill's going to roll it out here. Do you have that you can show? The phone number page. There we go. Can you put that up? That page up? Or was it too late?
I'm not sure which page you're.
You got to share the window here with this contact page you just put up.
Okay, let me just go. I can go back to the. Let's see. I would have to just a second. I just have to go back to the. Oh, here we go. Contact. Yeah, sure.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate it. I'll leave that up for a little bit and let people take that information down.
Yeah.
Those are all our websites. Our Fast Grow Hemp, we want to connect with growers who have big grows especially. We're very interested in connecting with them, having our test our product, having to see the incredible difference it's going to make in their grows. They're going to get so much more benefit out of every plant. It's going to blow their mind. So we're running special test prices right now for grows to contact us. That's the fastgrowhemp.com. And there's an investor packet on there too. There's the button. AuroraTech.us. That's our main hub for technology. Everything's centered there. And make sure you spell it correctly, AURORATEK.US, all of us. And then my metaphysical cosmic website is vortexnetworknews.com. And Alfred, I want to share one of our cosmic stories that we have shared together over there. Can you bring back on, Alfred? And let's talk about, and share the screener. Can you do that?
Okay, Alfred, could you switch screens here?
Yeah, well, we're now looking at your screen share, so you're going to have to. Let me see. This will stop.
Oh, stop share. Okay,
yeah.
There we go.
Okay, now we're back. Okay, so
We're going to talk about, what year was it, Alfred, that we were in New York together?
Oh, yeah.
1983 or 7?
Yeah, yeah. It was, we were in New York, and it was actually when we first met, and we first met, what, it was 31 years ago. I think we
Okay,
did the,
31 years ago, just
Yeah.
last week.
yeah. I think we met the calculation. Now, I don't recall the exact details that of
Well, I do.
of which freeways we were riding on, but I recall that we were in somebody's car. I'm not sure which, and it
You were
was
driving.
okay, and it was Michael and Legion and yourself and Mary Houston and myself, and all of a sudden, what I recall is that we were driving on one freeway, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 we were on a completely different freeway. And it was like we were teleported from one freeway to another freeway. And I mentioned that over the course of this past week to a mutual colleague of ours who's a former US chrononaut who's done teleportation and time travel for the US government. And in the US government's teleportation and time travel, they had to be very careful because they could not bring pieces of metal into the teleportation chambers because they would not teleport metal. And yet he observed that here, you know, what was it, 4,000 pounds of metal, which was our car, was teleported from one freeway to another freeway. So
I've been through teleportation many times.
yeah. So
teleportation many times.
yeah, exactly. So whichever agency performed that teleport could teleport our car from one freeway to the other freeway.
You didn't even get a bump.
Yeah.
You didn't feel a bump. You didn't feel a thing.
Yeah. So over to you. That is my memory, and perhaps you have a different memory. Could you go ahead?
Well, actually, I do remember you screaming, you and Mary, about how you were on different freeways. And because I wasn't really a New Yorker, I didn't really get where we had been and where we were. The big difference, all I knew is that you guys knew it, that we were on a different freeway. And you're going, what just happened? What just happened? And then when you told me about it, refreshed my memory about it years later, when we reconnected recently, you brought it up again, and they gave me a download from upstairs, you know, and they said, that's because you had some agents following you that we wanted to shake off you. So we teleported you to get rid of them.
Oh my God. Well,
one time I was driving in Siesta Key. Okay, now I got to tell your listeners about a couple cool places. Okay.
Okay.
I'm driving in Siesta Key in Florida. It's a key off of Sarasota, not down by Key West. It's in the other keys by Sarasota. There's 5 islands around Sarasota. So I'm there at Siesta Key, and they have the world's 100%, it's rated #1 in the world, quartz crystal beach. Okay, it's all white, like white powder. It's just so gorgeous. And all along that coastline, you know, you'll find beautiful beaches all along there, but none so fine, none so beautiful, none so perfect as Crescent Beach on Siesta Key. Okay, where the water gently rolls in because it's a crescent shape. That's the most desirable shape for a beach. You don't want a straight coastline where the water comes up and slaps it. You want it to roll in on a big crescent. So by the time it gets to shore, even a toddler can jump around in it, you know? It's nice and mellow. So anyway, you can do the backstroke in it. And so I loved living over there by Siesta Key. In fact, I taught water aerobics, and I was in the front page of their newspaper teaching water aerobics out there in the water at Siesta Key. So I had a lot of fun there, a good time, and I founded the Florida UFO Film and Book Society and traveled all over the state. I discovered while I was traveling around the state a place called Warm Mineral Springs. And there was Ponce de Leon's true fountain of youth, where 50,000 gallons of mineral water pour in every minute into a big area that's an acre and a quarter natural occurring pond. And the water is rated #2 in the world, Warm Mineral Springs, Florida. So I go there and I just fall in love with this place, and I fall in love with Siesta Key. We'll end up buying a house there because Siesta Key Beach and Warm Mineral Springs are only 20 miles apart. So it's great. You can go to both in one day, you know. So anyway, one night I'm driving back in Siesta Key, and what do I find? But somebody tailing me in a kind of a menacing way. Yeah, you can take that up the hook. And in a real menacing way, they were tailing me, and I was the only car on the road. It was real dark, and Siesta Key is a tiny little island, and I'm like, what? These people seem like they're trying to really get to me. And I wonder what's going on with them. And I kind of felt this heavy negative energy coming off the car behind me. And all of a sudden, just like this, they moved me to a new location. And I was literally a couple of miles up the road. And I was like, wow, that was impressive. So I know when they want to, they can do some divine intervention. And I talk about a lot of my divine intervention experiences in the government cover-up on human appearing extraterrestrials here in my book called Prepare for the Landings. So those of you who become investors get a free copy. And I am contacting those of you out there on a spiritual level as well as this 3D level to realize that this is golden age technology for the emancipation of mankind. Okay, because you can not only make plants grow faster, people feel rejuvenated, their cellular structures rejuvenate them and things like that, but this goes much further. It's the end of the plug-in. With our self-charging energy management system that we just got our patent on when Trump came into office, he got our patent through. And because of that, we're ready to go forward now and develop this technology for many, many, many different applications. In the future, we're not going to plug in anything. Everything will have a self-charging energy management system in it. Picture like a flashlight when you just turn it on, but picture instead of a battery in it, a little supercapacitor, so it can run for 50 years, no problem. That's our technology.
That is phenomenal. Yeah. That is absolutely phenomenal. Well, so you had mentioned that you wanted to do yet another program. How would you like to do that? I mean, what?
We could do it next Monday. If Mondays are good for you.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure. We're undergoing.
Somebody's desperately trying to get a hold of us. They're calling every phone we own.
yeah, good. And so we're just doing a bit of internal housekeeping at Exopolitics TV. So it may not be this coming Monday, but we can keep you posted as to when exactly we can schedule.
When it's convenient for you.
Yeah, sure.
No problemo.
Yeah, and then perhaps we can package this into a series, because in a way, this is so complex. When I find myself explaining it to people and urging people to tune in and to look at the videos, I find that I use the phrase, oh, it's not parallel universes, it's perpendicular universes, because you had talked about the right terms. But I don't quite have all of the vocabulary and all of the concepts down, so that perhaps in our next program, and maybe we could take a couple of weeks off, we could develop a primer, almost a kindergarten level primer.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Alfred, did you get the first one up yet on YouTube?
Okay, well, that is a whole issue that I'm glad that you raised that, because we're coming out with a whole series of public statements, starting with what we released yesterday. And it's very unfortunate that the Google company, which owns YouTube, has now come out with statements that they, and that's why we have to take a couple of weeks, and we're going to be releasing our public statements. But what occurred is that this past week, Google came out with a renewed contract for us, asking us to sign it, in which they require us news agencies to pledge that we will not report that events did not occur. And what that means
They
is
would
that,
what?
what that means is that we
No,
can't
say that again. I didn't get it at all. They want you to do what?
report on events as though they did not occur. In other words, we can't report false flag operations. And so we just came off of a 3-month suspension off of YouTube just a few days ago. And
We got kicked off, I think.
yeah, and concurrently with that, Google just released a new policy. And if you'll just hold on a second.
Now, is there other options that you can utilize?
Well, that's what we're doing. So that's why we want to take a couple of weeks. We're in the middle of creating our own network. So we're going to be our own YouTube, because now Google has in effect,
I hear one's FBI and the other CIA.
yeah, let me just go and get to
Google
my
and YouTube.
let me go to and get to my my
Monkey
Facebook page. And I don't know why it's taking so long to get there, but basically,
All right. So
what
why I wanted to tell the story about War Mineral Springs, just to end that up, is
yeah,
those of you out there who are suffering from demineralization, which almost everybody in the world is, especially in the United States and Canada, we haven't had a lot of high mineral foods. And, you know, if you go over there, you can remineralize your body, you won't believe the difference. So it's just a good vacation destination, and super cheap too, 20 bucks a day to go in there and use the facilities. I'd like to raise money to buy the facility too. That's another project aside from Aurora Tech, which is really my main project. But I would just like to see that Warm Mineral Springs be bought by somebody like myself with a consciousness and turn it into a mecca for people for healing. It hasn't been revitalized in 50 years. My friend who owned it went broke running it and never did any advertising or anything. That's why no one knows about it. So he owned it for like 30 years and never did anything with it. So now the city of Warm Mineral Springs owns it, and they're selling it for $6 million. And God, it's a steal, really. It's amazing how incredible of a place it is. So if any of you out there, any of your listeners, have deep pockets, or you don't have such deep pockets, it doesn't matter. You can come in at lower levels into our investor group. Our lowest level is 100 shares at a time, but usually people come in more at a $10,000 level if they can. So it's all up to the individual and what they can do and what they feel guided and motivated to do. But
Yeah,
we are getting ready to release this technology to Africa and other places.
right.
So,
And I think that that is more of what the future is, in the same way that you all are releasing this technology directly. We,
yes,
by the time we get together the next time, we'll be in the midst of it. We are creating our own media network. So we are no longer dependent on YouTube and Google, because what Google did in the last few days, and I can't get to that page now because it's that there's so much internet noise. They made we news companies, in order to use Google, they made it a requirement for us to sign a contract that says, if there's an official story, like on 9/11 or on Sandy Hook, and that official story is that, 19 Arabs took from wherever, took box cutters and slammed planes into the World Trade Center, or that
right.
school children were killed at Sandy Hook, i.e. that we are prohibited from reporting the true story.
Or your
And
version of the truth. Let's
yeah,
put it that way. Everybody's got their version of the truth.
no,
I've never
no,
seen
no,
anybody
but
who can agree on anything.
but wait, no, I really in the same way that you are bringing out scientific proof of the positive and the
Right.
negative, yeah. In that same way, for example, there was the 322 false flag at the British Parliament. And at that Parliament, they had an official scenario that the patsy was killed while crossing Westminster Bridge and shooting down people. Well, our cameras were filming the supposed dead patsy while he was on the ground on a police gurney, looking at our camera, smiling and joking with us. And according to the official scenario, he was dead at that time. That isn't subjective. Objectively, he's alive. Our cameras are filming him, and we're exploding the false flag scenario.
I wasn't meaning
What
it like a
Google
put down.
did,
Don't get
what
me wrong.
what
I was
Google,
saying everybody deserves to be able to give their opinion. I
no,
don't care if they don't agree with anybody. If they still should be allowed to give their opinion.
yeah, but this is objective data.
Yeah,
That
I
is,
got it. It's scientific. You got the objective data there. I
yeah.
understand it's.
So
Even
now,
if it's not objective data, if it's just your opinion on adding 2 and 2 together and getting 4, you should be allowed to do it.
yeah, and so now Google, between the last time that you all and us met and now, Google has come out with absolute rules forcing news agencies to sign a pledge that they will never bust a false flag operation. And whereas the satanic order, New World Order that we live under, operates on the basis of false flag operations. To my judgment, what that cabal of scientists from Einstein to Heisenberg to Oppenheimer, who I was gang stalked by one of their relatives, they committed a scientific false flag operation against humanity. Why? Because they're followers of the Anunnaki hybrid reptilians who follow the Talmud. and the Torah, and
Yeah.
that's what we're under. So
Mhm.
you know, so and so we're in the news business to show the truth and objectively. So what I say is let's get ready for our next segment. It may not be next Monday because of the trap that Google now has sprung on news agencies worldwide, which we're not going to sign that contract. It may
Well, are
take
you
us
going
a
to have
week
a
or two.
news network?
Sorry?
Are you going to have a news network? Is that what you're going to do?
We're starting our own news network. Yeah, they have
Okay, well,
forced us
I
to.
want to have a show on it. I want to have Vortex Network News and talk about all the cosmic stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And so we can
And
start
Bill
out.
can have a technology show, and then we can
Yeah.
play with you too.
Okay, so we will start out with small steps, but in this next show, and I will just have to let you know when we're ready to go with this new setup, and I'm having my first
So exciting.
meeting tomorrow to get this thing going. We would very much appreciate, because the webinar that we just went through is at the postgraduate level. I'll be frank, you know, I mean, I'm
Here
a
we go.
lawyer, I'm not a physicist. It's at the postgraduate level, and this is extraordinary. Well,
Yeah,
let's
guess
do
it
a
is.
next
You're the
show.
one debuting.
Yeah, so let's do a next show that's at the kind of PBS kindergarten level.
I don't think we need to do that. But anyway, you just study this a little bit, and we'll move on. So I gave
Okay.
you the Reader's Digest condensed version at the end about you know, of how it works a little bit and why it works. And
Okay,
we
good.
got it, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Now,
But Bill wants to go into the many applications and how we would go about achieving that.
okay, good. As far as I'm concerned, this is extraordinary, because what we've done in these three programs that we've done together, part 1 and 2, and now this will be edited into a further part 1 and 2, so we'll have four programs out, is to blast out of the water what a colleague of mine calls false Zionist science. I mean, I'll just call a spade a spade. It's false Zionist science. And there's no reason why the earth has to be still at the mercy of false Zionist science.
All right, Alfred, I got to sum it up for our listeners here as to what you're complaining about, which is, of course, a common complaint amongst all us truthers. Like if you Google the top 50 truthers on the radio here in the United States, I'm number 18 with 3.5 million listeners when they took their little poll. So what I want to say is this: we have the ability to take over this planet, the light workers. Okay, it's been in escrow for a long time. It's been in escrow a long, long time. It's been quarantined from the other worlds because of the warlike nature of many of the beings here on this planet. But we're here to liberate the planet. Okay, those of us like yourself who are star people, volunteers in Earth embodiment. Now, those volunteers in Earth embodiment, like the three of us, are here to lead the planet to a golden age. We're not here to keep on doing the same old dysfunctional stuff day after day. We are here to set it right, to set it correct. We're here to save this planet, not destroy the planet. And we're here to liberate mankind. Once you have free energy, you can live wherever you want, in a cave, on a boat. You can go any remote place you want, because you can power up and do what you need to do. So that emancipates mankind. And the 70% of the planet that's water becomes more habitable. People can have water cities. But when you're controlling the weather, like they've been doing for the last 50, 60 years, you know, when France disagreed with us invading Afghanistan, they gave France a summer they'll never forget. Thousands of people dropped dead from the heat. So, you know, they don't fool around. When they want to take down a place, they just take it down. Okay, New Orleans, you know, Haiti, you know, Puerto Rico, whatever they want to blast, what do they want to hit? You know, tornadoes in the Midwest, droughts, floods. These aren't God doing this. It's the other big G, government. Okay?
Or
So,
Google.
yeah, it's Google government. Anyway, so the point is, we're here to stop this. Okay? This is craziness. We can't allow this weather modification program called HARP to be employed in a secret, covert way and used against us as weaponry. It's insane. And Dwight Eisenhower talked about it. The next war will be fought with weather. Okay? So, you know, you want to starve people, give them a drought. You want to make them have to move, give them a flood, give them a tornado, give them a hurricane. And it goes on and on what they've been doing for the last few years, last 25, 30 years. The Red Cross can't even keep up with it. And by the way, I have stories about the Red Cross too that are not good. They're an evil organization, actually. I actually went to a Christmas party that the Red Cross put on in Palm Beach. And I couldn't believe it. I got tickets because I'm media. And they sent me 2 $500 tickets. So when I walked in, guess who was greeting me? Some babe dressed like a lizard with whips on Christmas Eve. I'm telling you. I mean, and then all these people were naked all around the dance floor dancing. They paid for naked people to come there, like dozens and dozens of them, to prance all around the party and everything. It was unbelievable. I mean, this is the Red Cross. Oh my God, is that the idea I had involved when I came here tonight? You know, this was not what I was thinking at all. You know, so I'm a little naive sometimes, but I've been to parties in Manhattan. Talk about Eyes Wide Shut, that movie. This was like it. So I kept saying to my girlfriend and my husband, what's going on here? You know, what is happening here? It was just so shocking. So that was at a big hotel in Palm Beach. So, I mean, our society has degenerated. And I don't know if it was ever anything fantastic to begin with. I don't know if there was any vestibules of sanity out there in large amounts ever. But, you know, our founding fathers, they cracked it open, that egg. And they said, hey, we want to create a great country. How do we do it? And they tried their best to lay out some rules to follow. Now, almost every rule has been broken almost. We've been subjugated. We've been whipped into shape by corrupt politicians. We've just really taken a beating. These last 100 years have been miserable for people here in America. But I think we're going to make a comeback now. I think it's time for us to move forward with more authenticity. And your programs are contributing to the authenticity and the regeneration, the rejuvenation, the Renaissance period that we're leading the people into right here, right now. Now's the time. We're the people.
Very well said. Very well said. So I would like to ask you if you have anything that you'd like to leave our viewers with.
Your turn. Your
until
turn.
we
You want to wrap it up?
Until we meet again.
Yes, Bill. I just want to encourage you to be supportive of us, that we do need your support as investors. We don't want to take money from the wrong people. And believe me, they've offered. It's not like they didn't approach us, you know? And we don't want to take any money connected with the military or anything like that. So we had to say no to a lot of big money. But we're here for those of you who have benevolence in your heart, who have the kindness and the love for humanity and want to see this technology rolled out in the right way. We have plans to roll it out that we'll talk about the next time. But I urge you to contact us. We do need some new investors with Aurora Tech so that Bill can purchase all his manufacturing equipment that he needs to get at this time. So we thank you all for checking us out and giving us a call.
Very good. Very good. Bill, do you have any message that you'd like to leave our viewers with?
Well, the next time we come back here, I'll get into some of the details about our technology and energy and also space applications. So we'll go into a lot more detail there.
Very good. And also kind of a review, maybe just a few slides, a review as to how far we've gone from our first class to our second class and now then to the third class. Because
a little quick summary review, yeah.
Yeah, this has been an extraordinary introduction. I want you to know that I even shared it with my 50th anniversary graduation with the Yale Law School, and we have some of our graduates down there in Arizona that said, "Oh my God, this is wild." So this is getting
all right.
spread to a lot of different.
Tell them to bring it on.
Okay,
Tell them to bring it on. We got a private lab. We show people this technology, and so Bill is like I thought you might invite him over to see the lab.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good.
Wow.
I will contact some of my colleagues who are in the Arizona area and ask them to get in contact with you. And,
well, we love that.
Yeah.
Because first of all, you got to have a mind that's open a little bit, and you got to be intelligent enough to comprehend it.
Yeah.
And then you have to have a heart.
Yeah.
That's open a little bit too, to jump in and participate.
Good. Good enough then. Well, until very soon, but
all right.
In the same way that I think that we're all now, we've said we have to leave these institutions that are just too corrupt, like Google, like all of these other institutions.
Like where you're from, right?
Like science, like this mainstream positive energy only science. Einstein, Heisenberg, Oppenheimer, they all had their chance, they blew it. So we are now creating the new earth. We're creating the new here. I totally agree with where you're coming from. Until we meet again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with all your many listeners and your wonderful listeners who have contacted us. I thank them so much. We've actually got people coming to see us from South Africa.
Amazing.
Because of you, Alfred.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, until we meet soon.
Great. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.